So,
I don't actually know which one we're recording for.
we're going to start with Who Made Me a Princess?
Ooh, hang on.
Athanasia, the baby.
That's right.
The baby. So welcome back to yet another off the shelf, yet another in my series of royal reincarnation, romance, death flag, otome, isekai, something. Um, Today we're going to talk about Who Made Me a Princess, story by Plutus, illustrations by Spoon. We are only talking about the first book, although the second book did officially come out in English just about a week ago, so I do have it, and we will probably eventually get to it, but it is not currently on the rush list. So, Who Made Me a Princess? So, I do want to give a preface to this one. So, thus far, most of the ones we've covered have been. This is, I think, the most similar to the Abandoned Empress out of all the ones we've covered, because she's reborn as a child, although this time as like a baby after dying in her first life. And basically she remembers how she died, and her goal initially at least is just to survive until she can escape, because she doesn't see a way out of her predicament. So it's not necessarily a romance. Like, obviously, it's going to end in romance. They all do. But the important part is the relationship with her father, not with a romantic partner.
Daddy issues.
Yeah. So a little bit of backstory on me with this. So I remember this was one of the earlier of this type of story that I read. But back when I read, so this is complete now, by the way. It's a completed the manhwa adaptation, and I do believe it is based on a web novel, I think, but I could be wrong. But I remember reading this when it was still ongoing, and I read up to, I think, the end of the equivalent end of like book 2, and then I kind of dropped it and didn't go back to it, like, at all. Like, I saw this recommended to me all over the place, and I was like, not my favorite. Not my favorite. I really see no need to go back to this. So this is actually my first time revisiting it in a long time, and I'm now currently binging my way through the rest of the chapters. So how did you feel about it?
Complicated. Um, on one hand, it's an interesting concept, and there are things in there I like with what they're doing. At the same time, I once again feel like we're barely getting anywhere. And maybe that's just because we're starting from volume one again, but now I'm really it's around this point where I'm really starting to feel the burn on how many of these we're reading and how much they're starting to blend together.
I mean, I will say so these are thick books, right? These are the thickest of all the manhwa
Yeah,
we've read
yeah.
so far, and you would think that it would cover more. Um, but you are very right in that very little happens. Like, we are, but
I
I
mean,
think part of the problem with that is that rather than meet her as a baby and then like kind of just skip through most of her life growing up, we are actually getting a pretty detailed look at her.
I'll run some defense for this model. Like for this model, I will absolutely run some defense here. I actually think what's covered there is about what I would expect. Like we got that first volume was set up. It's usually how first volumes are. You go to One Piece, it's going to be mostly getting the crew together. In volume one, you're not going to see that much happen in volume one alone. For a volume one, that's about what I expect out of a graphic novel format. It's
I
I think I'm just really hitting the point where I'm seeing so many of these setups and not getting a lot of payoff for any of them yet. This is not this Monwa's fault. Like, I want to be clear here. I'm just now really setting in how saturated the genre is. Even though this one is absolutely
Yeah.
doing unique things. Like, if you're looking for something unique in the genre, read this through. You probably will find it because it's not the same as Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter or Remarried Empress, but you still get a lot of the same sort of, oh, something horrible happened. I know it's coming one way or another. I'm going to try getting around it. Wait, this wasn't exactly what I expected. It's a little bit, there's more going on than I expected, maybe. Getting a lot of the same things there. And I don't know. I feel like I've heard this story before.
I mean, I will say, so on the
And you said
topic
this
of
one was
how,
earlier, right? This one was earlier. This is
yeah,
not a.
yeah, this is an older one.
Yeah, this is not one that should be feeling the victim of this. And I don't necessarily know if any of these would
But
necessarily get away from that at this point.
I think in this case, this also got its English book release pretty late. So like several series that are still ongoing have gotten releases before this. This was so early that it suffered a little bit in that it didn't get an English release for so long. So that's the kind of thing. But on the scale of length, right? So this first volume covers 13 chapters, which is over 250 pages. And I can say from a quick look at where I am in the online, the plot that she's worried about, right? Like that she talks about in spoilers here, but with the sister, right? That starts actually coming into play around chapter 35. So if this
See,
covers 13,
that plot sounds so interesting when she's describing it. Like the relationship between
mm-hmm,
the sisters sounds like an actually fun character dynamic here, but we're
mm-hmm.
not really getting into that here.
Well,
And what
and
we have is
I to be honest, these books are so long on their own. I didn't really want to give you like 30 chapters of it. I mean, that would be like
and
900 pages.
I don't necessarily want to take like that many chapters for
Yeah.
most of these off the shelves.
Yeah.
Um, but I think I'm hitting volume one fatigue here on these.
That's entirely fair. I think with a lot of these, I have recently pushed you through quite a few volume ones, and a lot of that's because there has been a recent spike in paper publication. Because I don't often direct you to read on the apps, right? Because if it's not available on Webtoon or Manta, then most of the other apps have a model where you could really only read 3 or 4 chapters before you'd have to start paying by the chapter. And I don't pay by the chapter because I just can't afford it. It's too expensive when a series is like 150 chapters and you're paying like $2 to $4 like every single time you want to read a few chapters. You know, I'd have to do calculations out on like the comparable cost, but I'm pretty sure that like 13 chapters on Tapas would have been more expensive than this book was, based on the price of coins and stuff. And then they're also non-transferable, non-shareable, so you'd have to have my account info to read them. So I don't
Mm-hmm.
often have you do that, and so I'm somewhat limited in that I can really only show you things that I can find really good Tortuga versions, right? Like properly translated Tortuga versions or paper copies. And we have recently had a spike. And I personally, if I had known this was coming out, this would have been one of the earlier things I would have had you read, because this and Abandoned Empress in particular are both completed series and they're older. Like they're back from like a couple years ago. I mean, this started coming out in Korean, the manhwa adaptation in 2019, which is pretty early for the genre, especially the kind of Korean and Chinese side of it. Um, so I mean, it's just, you know, some of this is on me for kind of like jumping on it at this point, but at the same time, it is also a lot. But I really like this book now. I think I didn't like it as much when I first read it. And I think that was because when I first read it, there were only like 20 something chapters out. And
Mm.
unless you get to around chapter 30, you haven't really hit the point that she's worried about. And it's because the chapters are so long, especially in scrolling format, it drags, in my opinion, to read online. Like it's a little bit rough to get through in those first like 20 chapters or so. And I mean, keep in mind, even volume 2, which you will get eventually, will only get you up to chapter 24, which still doesn't quite get you to where I would where a lot of real plot starts happening, like, heavily. You know? But in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
aspect, this is almost a little bit closer to a slice of life than like a hardcore like romance novel or something, because it is really just going through her life. And thank God, at least it's not going like a chapter a week or something. At least we're
Yeah, there were
moving.
a few jumps here and there.
Yeah, yeah. We do jump a little bit, skip a year or two here and there, go from being a toddler to like being able to walk, you know. Um, but how do you feel about the characters?
I mean, they seem all right. I enjoy the quirk of the little girl where she's absolutely in it for the money sometimes.
She's just like, ooh, sparkly gold.
I feel like, is it the emperor or the king in this one?
Emperor.
He's all right. I feel like we see a lot of his character archetype in other like in some of the romantic male romantic leads of some of the other characters,
Mm-hmm.
like the I don't care, I am slightly psychotic kind of thing.
We love a good psychotic boy.
Except
We
it
love that.
it's starting to feel like I'm getting like heavy like isekai harem. This is the slightly crazy girl.
But knickknack, that's girl dinner. Hot crazy men are girl dinner.
Yeah, and I'm already sick of boy dinner, so why would I not get sick of girl dinner?
That's entirely fair. He is a little emotionally detached is certainly a way to describe some of the characters in these.
Yeah.
And to be honest, we're not really getting in the first volume. We don't get a lot of his perspective. We focus a lot on her perspective and her side of things. And in some ways, I kind of like that because, and I mean, like, obviously, you'll see this moving forward, but like in the future, it does shift focus a little bit more to like kind of what some of the other people are thinking. And it almost makes it feel like as the books go on, she's becoming more mature and learning to take other people's thoughts into account. Whereas the first book, this is just her going, me, me, me. Look at what's happening to me and what I'm seeing other people as. You know.
I think I have a lot more to say about at this point the genre as a whole, but I know you want to do a more genre focused video at some point, so I'll hold off
Yeah.
on that there. But I'm seeing now that I'm seeing the patterns forming, I am starting to draw more parallels between this and the isekai boom in the anime industry.
It is very much girl dinner, boy dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say I do. There is one thing I did like in volume one about all of this, and it's oh fuck. Give me a second. I had it in my head and now I've forgotten it. Hang on. Oh, I was gonna say something. It was about something to do with it. Fuck.
I mean, I can say
Oh,
something about
hang on. I remembered. I remembered. I do think it's interesting that this is one of the first times that we have seen a main character who didn't make it to adulthood but died and was reincarnated. I mean, she died young. So, like, she wasn't fully
Mhm.
mature when she died the first time. So her outlook, in my opinion, does differ from a lot of the other reborn or reincarnator characters we've seen who are kind of like were adults at one point or another and have a much more mature and cynical outlook on life, whereas she still seems very childish.
maybe maybe I would say that. Um I think the problem isn't necessarily the character, the main, like, unlike, say, male isekai, I think the problem I'm seeing with the characters right now, I'm not actually seeing that much problem with the characters. Some of the archetypes for the males get repetitive, but for the female main leads, we're getting a good amount of diversity in them. Like she has her quirks here.
Yeah.
This is not the character literally looks the same and the gimmick is the smartphone again kind of deal like with Isekai. I think the problem is just the plot beats feel too similar.
Mm-hmm. That's fair.
Actually,
That's
I'm
very
starting to
fair.
hit the point. You should know this, the cycles of genre. You did research into this and it almost became a video. I'm hitting the dead horse point where now I just kind of want to see a character in one of these like get absolutely maimed, like horrible backstory, gets into the actual story, and they're still dragged through the mud and occasionally have a win.
So,
Oh
I
Christ, I gave
okay.
you a
No. So I haven't. I've made allusions to this before, but I have been on a quest recently, and that is to actively keep track of all of this type of book that I am reading and have read. And at the moment,
Oh, what the fuck, Seki?
and
What the fuck?
these are only the ones that I have remembered or read in the past 3 weeks. I am still finding old ones by looking through all of my accounts on various websites and then adding them to the list and how far I've read to. Um, and it is really interesting because I have started seeing categories for some of these. Like there are, and I'll get into this more in the later video. Like everyone very much look forward to that video because even within this particular genre, there are distinct subcategories of heroine. And the more you read, the more clear those lines become. And I will be very interested in discussing all of them. Because you've seen a few now.
I'm
And
not
you're
going to have
likely
to read
see...
all of those before we do that video.
No,
right?
no. This is my personal list.
Okay.
And thus far, I've only got like 50 on here. I'm sure I can double it if I finish going through all of my old accounts. You look so upset.
It hurts me. It hurts me. You're killing me here.
That's a you problem. I will be interested in continuing Who Made Me a Princess on the channel. This is not like Not So Wicked Stepmother and a couple of the others we've read where, you know, kind of either or. This is one that has recaptured my interest. Especially because I never finished it originally when it was coming out. So I'm now on the way to finishing it.
I think a lot of my fatigue would be assuaged if we make, because I see where these stories aren't are different, and some of those we've gone farther into. I see where they're very different.
Yeah.
I think some of my problems would be assuaged moving past volume ones.
I think for this one I'm going to wait until book 3 is out, and I'm gonna give you 2 and 3 together because
Okay.
I really don't. I really think that's gonna be where we kind of need. Like if I could have given you the first 3 volumes, I would have. But A, that would have been like 700 pages of reading, and B, the 3rd volume just isn't out yet. We've still got a couple months before it comes out, so we will be back to this, but once I have volumes 2 and 3 for you to read. Yeah. So, you know, as usual, leave recommendations in the comments. Tell us if you've read this and how you felt about it. Like, comment, subscribe, and try harder, everyone.